And if we move from the theory to the implications, from the theory to the methodology, one sees within positivism a number of lessons about how we might want to look at law. Firstly, there's an emphasis on the sources of law. Who is doing one of the international law LLMs? So I think it's still common in international law textbooks. It used to be quite common in other areas of law, but I think international lawyers still do this. But if you look at an international law textbook, certainly the ones that were around when I was an undergrad, there's a first question, there's a first chapter often on sources of law. And I think international lawyers still get worked up about what are the sources of international law. Do we accept something or other as a source of international law? We used to be a bit more concerned with that in other areas of law than we are now. If you look at some of the older jurisprudence textbooks, and I do recommend this as something to be instructive. You've got a spare hour in the library and you want to do something just a bit different. Look at one of the older jurisprudence textbooks. And I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, just in case you were wondering, that these were before even my time. But if you look at something like Diaz on jurisprudence, there was in that a whole lot of stuff about the sources of law and the method of the common law, which we don't really teach very much now, except in a fairly straightforward way in our English process modules that might study as an undergraduate. So, emphasis on sources of law. Law is observable empirically through observing the output of legislatures and courts and the behavior of actors within the legal system. So, including state practice in international law, the practice of merchants, the opinion of jurists in international law. Law as it is can be still maintained, be distinguished from law as it ought to be. The role of doctrinal analysis is to discover what the law is and to clarify options for reform. So moving into the realm of doctrine, there's a nice little book. This also I recommend to you if you're studying law in the UK for the first time. It's a book called Introduction to the Study of Law. It's an edited collection by Simon someone or other. His name I forgot. He's a PR. I'll remember this in a minute. It's in my last slide. A very little thin pamphlet. I know the guy as well. Not well, so this is embarrassing. A very little thin pamphlet. It's published by Green, which is the Scottish imprint of Sweet and Maxwell. And it's got chapters about different ways of studying the law. There's a chapter on doctrinal or black letter law. There's a chapter on philosophical approaches. There's a chapter on historical methods, feminism, socio-legal studies. Each written by someone who is renowned for taking that approach. And even though it's written at a very introductory level, I'm sure even if you have studied the law in the UK for 3 years now, there will be one or two things in this that will make you think. I promise you that. It's not necessary reading for you guys, but if you are new to the study of law in the UK, I would really recommend it. The chapter on doctrinal study of law is written by Jenny Steele, who's a very distinguished tort lawyer. and one of the best in anyone's estimation. Here's what she says about doctrinal study. Because doctrinal study is often dismissed as black letter law. You could be a mere black lecturist. It's kind of a dismissive title. But Jenny sticks up for doctrinal study. She says it still forms the core of every undergraduate law degree, and it continues to be the most widespread form of legal study, even when mixed with other approaches. Indeed, skill in doctrinal method could be said to be what distinguishes the lawyer from the non-lawyer. And I think that's true, because if you look back to my examples, Carol Pateman, I don't think, is a lawyer. By background, she's a feminist philosopher. Duncan Kennedy is a lawyer. Dworkin is as much a philosopher as a lawyer. The researching the dynamics of law, these kind of studies could be done, this kind of research could easily be done in the Department of Social Work or the Department of Economics, or whatever the names of Sussex are, as in the law school. Which is not to say the law school isn't a good place to do them, but we don't have any kind of exclusive competence to do them. Whereas facility handling, understanding, using doctrine creatively to make arguments and analyze the law is something fairly unique to the kind of activities of the law school. She says doctrinal study is closely associated with legal expertise and with thinking like a lawyer. And this is both its strength and its weakness. And I do like that, because the idea that seeing the law doctrinally could be both a strength and a weakness. It's certainly a strength, and it puts aside different considerations and gives you a certain kind of focus, a certain kind of analytical power to drill down to answer a very specific question: what is the law? But maybe could also be said to give you kind of blinkers. It closes your eyes, or risks closing your eyes to some other questions of equal importance. And it's concerned with the substantive content of the law, and therefore with the analysis of legal materials, primarily for the kinds of purposes associated with lawyering. What are the purposes associated with lawyering? Deciding what the law is, advising clients on the law, articulating options for reform, identifying ambiguities that might need resolved, and so on. And here's just something else she said. I do like this little, and you can read it, this was no more than 20 minutes reading. And she gives the lie to the argument that just because you want to identify the law as it is, that you are necessarily closed off to normative arguments about values. A familiar criticism of doctrinal method, she says, is that it purports to be value-free. Though the skills imparted to law students may not appear to emphasize substantive values, the idea that doctrinal lawyers actively purport to be value-free is not supported by looking at the debates between academics. In some areas, like environmental law or healthcare law, discussion of values is very much part of the emergence and delineation of the field of study. So, here's, and she's right, I know a little bit about healthcare law. I do write about it from time to time, but only to wind up my wife, who's a proper healthcare lawyer. So I sometimes say something about medical law and publish it. But, you know, if you know something about the emergence of medical law, it used to be that there was no medical law. What there was tort law. And an awful lot of tort law cases are about doctors injuring their patients. And around from the 1960s and 70s, a lot of tort lawyers started to think about, well, maybe these cases that, you know, involve doctors injuring their patients and doctors operating on patients without their consent, maybe they have something in common that's different from just the unintentional part of negligence in general or the intentional part of battery in practice. And we started to sort of see that these medical cases had a life and a logic of their own and started to interpret that. And this is how medical law came into being. And they were looking at things like, you know, what's the importance of the autonomy of patients? So if a doctor doesn't gain consent from a patient before he operates on them, is this different from another kind of, you know, battery? Well, technically it's the tort of battery, but it's different from other kinds of batteries. In the days when, you know, the ideology of medical paternalism was a lot more dominant than it is today. So that's how a whole new field emerged, and a whole doctrinal category